All right, I think we're ready. At 9 o'clock? So we will commence. Excellent, thank you. Welcome, thank you everybody for coming. We appreciate your time, giving us the time this morning. I think we have what I believe is going to be quite an interesting morning for you. We have taken the feedback from the meeting in June, and so we're going to do a couple things differently, but the one thing we do commit to is we're going to try to keep it shorter than 2 hours. Many of you commented you thought it was 2 hours. There you go, give that gentleman a cigar. Many of you said it was too long, and that's fair. So we're going to try to keep it to 1 hour and 40 sort of tops. Plus I have a golf appointment with my son at 11:45, so I got to rush out of here anyway. And if I'm late, what happens is if I'm late and I don't tee off, I lose the hole automatically. So I struggle enough with him trying to win the holes without having him like beat me on that. So anyway, for those of you that don't know me, Rich Fuchs, I'm the president of SHPOA. We have a number of administrative things we have to get through in the fall meeting. And so we'll go through those fairly quickly, and then we'll get on to the main part of the presentation. Let me start with a couple of thank yous, as always. Jeff, you want to flip me? The theater. These folks are fantastic. This is, we were conning it, I think it's maybe the 5th year that we've been here in the theater. We were here pre-COVID and then, of course, post-COVID. The theater offers this to us at no cost. They come early. The lady that's in charge, Jen, she was here before any of us setting up. So we thank them profusely for offering this beautiful facility to us. The AV and the speakers and that are fantastic. And so, patronize the theater. Barbie's still running. I understand that many people have seen it once, so now is the second time around to go see Barbie, for those of you. But you have to wear pink. That's the only rule. Also, second thank you is, again, Sam Weirman and IDE Insurance Agency. They are the sponsors, once again, of the coffee and donuts. They've been doing this for several years for us. They graciously offer. Sam takes care of the insurance needs for SHPOA. I use them personally. So if you have a need, please patronize Sam's establishment. They would very much appreciate it. They do very, very good work. Very, very responsive. So, but again, thank you, Sam. Thank you, IDE, for providing us with the refreshments before we get going. So, Jeff, let's go through the agenda very quickly. If you can flip back, I would just do thank you. So we're going to basically, as I said, we've got a number of administrative things. The trustee ratifications, the award of our Citizen of the Year. We're going to talk a little bit about our 5K race. I have dressed in the 5K shirt, the Harbor Hustle shirt. No, I did not run the 5K. My family did, my wife did, so I was very proud of them, but I was too busy organizing to actually train to run the 5K. If you believe that, I got a bridge to sell you. So next year, I've been told next year I have to run the 5K. We're going to announce the winners of our photo contest. And then we're going to get into the main part. So the first piece will be a presentation on financial sustainability. Sustainability is a big issue for SHPOA. And all of you have seen the stool with the 4 legs of sustainability: water, beach, bay, and flood management. But as we've said, the foundation of sustainability is really the financial sustainability, having the resources necessary to be able to make the investments and deal with the issues that Mother Nature and we are bringing upon ourselves. So Chris Yates, who's our Borough Engagement Chair, and Susan Barrett, who's a member of our Sustainability Committee, have put together a presentation talking about the overview of the budget, a little bit on the SHPOA 10-year plan, which we distributed last year to folks, and we're in the process of working with the Borough Council and the CFO and the Borough Administrator to update, and just kind of look at where we stand. And then we're going to move on to the Q&A. Again, this is another place where we listen to you. So many members in the feedback said that they would like to ask the questions directly. They don't want Rich to stand up there and filter their questions. So we have the agreement that questions will be brought directly by you up here to the participants. And we will set some ground rules when we kick off the session, but we will have a Q&A where you get to ask the things that you want to know about Stone Harbor. Okay? So that's the day. All right, let's start. The first thing we need to do, I'd like to first introduce the current trustee. This is the 22-23 trustee board. So they're all sitting over here. You don't have to stand up if you don't want to, but if you want to stand up and wave and be acknowledged, please do. So we had Heidi Yacker, who was our secretary. We had Paul Grady, who serves our treasurer. Homi Kapadia, who served as the chief information officer. And our solicitor, which was a new position we created to help us deal with many of the legal questions that come up, was Tony Tenari. Our trustees, and I'm going to see if I can get all these right. We had Susan Barrett, Jay Blackman, Cynthia Burton, Chuck DeLeon, Beth Ann Greiser, Justine Herzog, Scott Jardin, Dwight Jensen, Ted Kestner, Dawn Otterbein, Beth Toolin, Kerry Wendell, Jeff, who everybody knows very well, needs no introduction, and Chris Yates. So if you wouldn't mind just giving everybody a little round of applause for what they've done. They've put a lot of time in this year, folks. They really have. This has been one of the most active boards of trustees that I've been involved with, and I've been involved with the organization a long time. So on behalf of all the members, trustees, thank you for everything you've done for Stone Harbor this year. Now, we have some trustees that are completing their terms and will not restand for trusteeship. Those are John Knoll, who's unable to be with us today, and Joe Meyer. So Joe, if you'd stand up, please. Please thank Joe. Joe's been a trustee for a number of years, and every event we have, every time we ask for a volunteer, Joe's hand goes right up. He's been a great trustee, and thank you, Joe, on behalf of everybody for all that you've done for SHPOA and for Stone Harbor. So the first thing I need you all to do is we're going to ratify the trustees for the new trustees that are coming in. There's some trustees that are existing. They are completing their term in September of 2023, and under our bylaws, trustees are permitted to run for a second term. So we have 3 trustees that were eligible to accept the second term, and those trustees did all offer to put themselves forward for a second term. So I'd first like to get your ratification for those trustees, and those are Cynthia Burton, Ted Kestner, and Jeff Woolery. So by voice vote, and by the way, the trustees have met and have recommended all of the renominations as well as the new trustees. So as the membership under our bylaws, you are required or asked to ratify the recommendation of the trustees. So my ask is first for a voice vote on the ratification of the recommendation for the second term for the 3 trustees just mentioned. All in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed? Thank you. Okay, so those trustees are ratified. Now the second is we have 5 new trustees that have come on, put themselves forward. I will tell you that the last couple of years we've been blessed with some incredible individuals that have put themselves forward. It's kind of the old thing where you say, I used to say, like where I went to university, I said if I tried to get in there today, they would laugh at me. Well, similar with SHPOA, these folks, the last several years, the trustees that have come forth and put themselves forward for nomination are really high caliber individuals that have a great passion for Stone Harbor. We've met with all the candidates in advance, talked to them about what is SHPOA, what our focus is, and I will tell you they're coming to us with tremendous energy, with enthusiasm, and frankly with a love of Stone Harbor, wanting to keep Stone Harbor what it is. So our new trustee nominations, and again, all have been unanimously recommended by the Board of Trustees, the current board, for acceptance as new trustees, are Chris Campbell, Chris is over here, John Grace, I don't think John's here with us, Rich Palco, who was not able to be here, he had to go to a family wedding in Italy of all things. I feel really bad for the guy. I offered to take his place, but he said no. Mike Walker is over here, and Peter Webster is right there. So again, the trustees, the current Board of Trustees has unanimously recommended these 5 individuals to be accepted as trustees of SHPOA, commencing with the completion of this meeting. So again, I ask the membership, all in favor of the ratification of those recommendations, please say aye. Aye. Thank you. Any noes? No. Okay, great. Thank you. Appreciate it. Okay. Thank you very much. And thank you, everybody. Again, these individuals put their hands up and they have offered to really commit their time to continuing the mission of the organization. So I'm really thrilled. The last thing from a formalities perspective is we have 3 officers that are up for nomination. So the way our officers work is Officers serve 2-year terms. There are 6 officers. So every year, 3 of the officers are brought forth either for renewal or for having a new officer position. So currently the president, the chief information officer, and the treasurer, we are all in the first year, completing the first year of our 2-year terms. So this year for nomination are the vice president's role, the secretary's role, and the solicitor's role. So the trustees have recommended Chris Yates for the role of vice president. They've recommended Heidi Yacker to be renominated for her second 2-year term as trip secretary. And they've nominated Tony Tenari to fill a full first-year term. Tony only did a 1-year term so we could get everybody back on schedule. So this would be Tony's first full 2-year term as solicitor. All the individuals have agreed to accept those nominations. They were unanimously ratified by the trustees. So again, my question for the membership is, I ask for your ascension. Do you agree with the recommendations of the trustees as to the officers? Please say aye. Aye. Thank you. Any opposed? See, I told you nobody would oppose you. So thank you, everybody. Chris, Tony, Heidi, thank you for, again, offering to serve. All right, so that covers really our governance matters, if you want to call it that. So our next matter was we want to introduce the Citizen of the Year. We had some really fine nominations for the Citizen of the Year this year. This is an award that's given out each year to somebody who really does something special for Stone Harbor. I'd like to read the nomination that was submitted by one of our members. And you don't have to be a member, by the way, to be nominated or to make a nomination. But this was submitted by a member. He's active in many areas in Stone Harbor. Presently, he conducts the popular Talk of the 30s on Wednesday nights at the Stone Harbor Museum. He also produces Museum Minute each week for the museum's website. He's a movie producer, producing several films about Stone Harbor for the museum. His latest production was Miracle on 81st Street, which tells the story of the black population that once lived in our community. He's a former president of the museum board. He's been active with the Cape May County Library System, conducting group writing sessions. He was an English teacher for 40 years before his retirement. The writing group he now works with, the Stone Harbor Writers, recently published Thursdays with Jim, a memoir anthology. Before that, he published his memoir, There It Is, describing his service as a Marine Infantry platoon commander in Vietnam, where he earned the Silver Star. His service to his country and Stone Harbor has been outstanding. The Citizen of the Year for 2023 is Jim Talone. Jim, we saw Jim earlier. He's getting a donut, hopefully. Okay, thank you, yeah. See, Jim was scheduled to be here, but he's not. So on behalf of Jim, we will accept this award. We'll pass it on to Jim, and Jim's name will join an esteemed group of individuals who've been named Citizen of the Year. The plaque is found in the Borough Hall, so if you're ever in Borough Hall, up near the entrance, on the right-hand side on the wall, the plaque is there. Please take a look and see not only Jim, but, like I say, a rather esteemed group of individuals who've done an enormous amount over the years for Stone Harbor. So again, Jim, thank you for all you do. All right, so the next thing is, we talked a little about Harbor Hustle. The Harbor Hustle was our first attempt at a 5K race. Our goal was to raise a donation for a local organization, and in this year's, we selected the museum. We had a lot of people that were actively involved. Our community engagement committee really did an enormous amount of work. Jay Blackman, who's our chair, is not able to be here. We have Don Otterbein, who was on the committee. Ted Kessler was on the committee. Dwight Jensen was on the committee. And by the way, Dwight, thank you. Dwight is also, many of you know, the general manager of the yacht club, and they graciously donated the bananas that people were able to consume after the race to re-energize themselves, as well as the water cups that were used to refresh people at the end of the race. And Jeff Woolery. Jeff was one of the key organizers of it. So I'm going to turn the mic over to Jeff and let Jeff talk a little bit about the race, but also award the donation to Stone Harbor Museum.
Thank you, Rich. And thank you for all that participated or showed up just to cheer everyone on. This was quite an undertaking for SHPOA. It actually started with a former Borough employee and Beach Patrol member who is an avid runner. And he came to us last year, came to SHPOA and said, you know, we used to do a lot of races here, and we don't seem to have many races any longer. Is there something we can do about that? And so I introduced him to a few people, Gensemer, who's one of our council persons, Jenny Olson, who handles a lot of our community engagement types of things, and the process started. And so first of all, I really want to thank the borough. We were late at getting this started. We've never done it before. We were very much on a learning curve, and it was quite a ride. We ended up having, as you can see up there, 259 registrants. They told us well in advance, don't get nervous, but most of your registrants will be in the last 10 days. I can tell you we were nervous, because we're trying to raise money and we're thinking, how much money are we going to lose? But it all came together. We had a number of teams that were formed, and actually there were over 50 members of the 259 were team members. We're absolutely going to do this again next year. The timing might be a little different, might try to move it up a little bit, but we absolutely want to do this again next year. And we're in discussions with the borough about trying to get potentially a second race to help with our shoulder season activities, possibly in September. So there's going to be a lot more to come on that. But it was really a great event. You know, it's great to have family events that you can get. We had, I don't know, actually the youngest were probably, there was at least one person in a stroller that some brave person pushed in the hole. So I guess that was the youngest. I don't know what was on the top end age-wise, but it was really a great event. I want to thank our local sponsor, Pete Smith's. I think most of you are familiar with their surf shops. And they actually reached out to us saying, hey, what can we do to help with this race? So we really want to thank them a lot. And Ivy Rehab, I don't know if many of you are familiar with Ivy Rehab. They're a rehabilitation center. They'll actually be opening a place here in Cape May County next year. I think they're in the process of doing that right now. And as was said, we wanted to look at some of our local charities. And we decided on this year that it would go to the museum. So what I had hoped to do, but Jim is not here, because this was the best part, is I actually got to go out and get one of these, you know, the big check, right?
For those of you that have seen the movie, I call it the Happy Gilmore check.
Where do you get these? You have to go to, so what I did is I Googled image big check, and of course, you know, it pops right up of exactly what you want to do. So, if Jim was here, I'd be handing this to him.
Hold on. I understand Mike Turner's here.
Oh,
right there.
Okay, excellent.
Bring Mike in.
Great. So I get to hand a big check to somebody. Our treasurer asked me if this was something that was going to be deposited and did we need the account information, and I really wanted to see this, you take this to your bank and sign the back of it. But, so we raised over $4,000 for a very, very good cause. So thank all of you that participated, and look forward to your participation next year. Thank you. You're welcome.
I want to thank two other organizations. First off, I want to thank, as part of the race, the Stone Harbor Police Department and the Stone Harbor Public Works Department. So they said, okay, the race starts at 7:30, be there by 6. I also want to thank all of my volunteers over here. A lot of our trustees were there. We all watched the sun come up. But I will tell you, by the time we got there, the police and the Public Works folks had already set everything up and were ready to go. And they were incredibly helpful. Tom Shuda and his team, and Manny and the Public Works Department, we could have asked for more help. So again, you know, when you talk about what do the folks do in Stone Harbor, what do we get in terms of services, this was a great example for me of how, coming together, we were all able to do something for the good of our community. So thanks to them. And thanks to Second Capital Running. They were the folks who helped us organize the race. It was brilliant. I mean, we basically just showed up and they told us what to do, and they were really, really well organized. So we'll use them again in the future for races. But as Jeff said, we really would like to make this at least a once a summer event, if not more, because the more races we can hold, the more money we can raise, the more organizations we can provide support to. And what I'd ask all of you to think about is, going forward next year and beyond, who are the organizations that you'd like to see us support with the proceeds, the donations from races? So you can think about that, you can feed it into the contact box, and we'll bring it forward as we plan for next year. So again, one more time, thank you to Jeff, Jay, the entire committee. These guys worked tirelessly. There were hours and hours of preparation. Thank you, folks. Okay, I'm going to introduce Homi Kapadia. He's our Chief Information Officer. Homi is going to present the winners of the Stone Harbor SHPOA property contest, SHPOA photo contest. Apologies.
Thank you, Rich. And actually, real thanks go to Scott Jordan, who's our video cameraman in the back. Scott leads our overall communications and social media, has run this contest really effectively for the last several years. And we had over 190 entries this year. They got whittled down to a dozen based on votes that the trustees did, and then it was opened up to the membership to get a final 3 award winners. So with that, why don't we start with the third prize? The third place winner is Christina Francisco. I know Christina's not here today, but again, an awesome photo. Second place, Sydney Bauer. Again, really captures a lot about what we love in this place. And the winner, I know the winner is here, and that is Becky Cartagno. Becky? Becky says she's a new member, so welcome our newest member too.
Yeah. And again, thanks to all the members. Thanks to everybody that provided photos, but to all of you, because as you're aware, the way it works is we get the entries, it goes through a process to whittle down to 12, and then you vote. And I think we had almost a record number of votes for the photos this year. So again, thank you all for participating and for making your selections. That's what makes it work. So, all right, well, that's the administrative and awards section. So I'm going to turn it over now to Chris Yates, who, as I mentioned, is the chair of our Borough Engagement Committee, and to Susan Barrett, who's a member of our Sustainability Committee. They've worked extensively on the issues of financial sustainability, working, as I say, closely with the Borough and with the CFO and the Borough Administrator on this. So let me turn over to Chris and Susan, and they're going to walk you through financial sustainability.
Exciting stuff.
So good morning. Just a little bit about Borough Engagement. This is the SHPOA's newest committee. We launched it last September, so we're finishing our first year. And sort of a brief mission statement, and that is, we want to engage with Stone Harbor's elected and appointed leadership on issues of governance, taxes, and spending as advocates for Stone Harbor property owners. That is very expansive. There are a lot of issues that come into our comment box on the website, not just the financial part of the borough, but also the way some of the ordinances are impacting property owners and issues with, maybe quality of life that can be addressed by borough policy or things like that. So we like to engage on all of those issues. So fiscal sustainability, the SHPOA has talked for many years about, as Rich said, some of these issues of other issues of sustainability. But fundamentally, if Stone Harbor is not financially successful and fiscally sustainable, none of the other stuff can be accomplished. And so that's what we are here today to talk about. We believe that fiscal sustainability is only achievable when spending is prioritized and planned, capital needs are funded prudently. Within the context of long-term planning and a commitment to follow the plan, and when all municipal revenue sources are identified and exploited, the fiscal challenges facing the borough cannot be met solely through property taxes, and those challenges must be met by all who enjoy the bounty that we appreciate from Stone Harbor. In addition to the fiscal issues, there are quality of life issues that are impacted by municipal government through ordinances, policies, and priorities. In April, we issued a letter to the mayor and council reviewing the 2023 budget. We identified a number of issues that we believe should be addressed. I think every member of SHPOA got a copy of that letter. So our comments included things like the budget was developed to address current year needs without the benefit of a prepared long-term fiscal plan to guide priorities and decision-making. In the absence of such a plan, we do not believe that a good budget can be prepared. We saw spending increase about 9% and taxes increased only 3.4%. The gap was filled primarily by using surplus. And surplus has now been drawn down to a level that limits the borough's ability to meet emergency needs. And the need to regenerate that surplus to a prudent level is another budget demand that will have to be met. The budget needs to establish capital funding reserves for critical infrastructure improvements, similar to those established for the beach and the bay. There is not a separate capital budget that reflects current and projected needs. And 24% of the budget is for debt service. Debt has been used to fund short-term needs, ordinary maintenance and repair requirements, and beach replenishments, all items that have useful lives far shorter than the debt that is being used to fund them. I will say that the current administration is working on a strategic plan that we hope will address some of these issues, particularly the debt issue. Vince Conti, member of the reporter for the Cape May County Herald, has written a number of articles that detail some of these issues. Most recently, on August 21st, he analyzed debt levels at all of the Cape May County communities and showed that Stone Harbor had the highest debt service as a percent of the budget and among the lowest surplus balance of any of the communities in Cape May County. As Rich mentioned, SHPOA has developed an extensive 10-year financial plan that is updated each year. And we've shared that plan with the borough, and it includes the needed capital projects. The plan continues to show significant property tax increases to meet these needs. Even if a long-term financial plan is adopted and future budgets reflect the discipline of that plan and effective prioritizing spending results, it will take many, many years to repair Stone Harbor's financial condition. Turn this over to Susan, who's going to go through some of these budget comments.
Okay. Hi, everybody. So we just took a look at the 23 budget versus last year, and these are just some highlights from the budget that we've put together for your information. So I'm just going to go through these briefly, and if you have questions, you can save those for our council members and Manny, or you can answer them. So first off, the gross revenue for 23 is projected at just under 21 million. The gross revenue is comprised of largely taxation, secondly fees from beach tags, parking, etc., and then surplus. So this year, as Chris mentioned, we had surplus. We used of 2.7 million, the borough did. I just want to explain to you what surplus is, because I think there's been a lot of questions on that issue. And essentially, it's a reserve. So if you establish a budget at the beginning of the year and your expenses wind up being less than your revenue, then you effectively have a surplus or a reserve. The purpose of that reserve is to keep it on hand for years when maybe the opposite thing happens. You have an unexpected expense, you need to meet it, you can't go back and raise taxes or get additional fees anywhere. So you use a surplus. It sounds confusing to people, but really it's sort of just like managing your own budget at home and saving a nest egg for something in the future. So the borough needs to, as all state entities do, have a balanced budget. It's required by law. So Therefore, sometimes the surplus is used to accomplish that, but there's nothing like really wacky about it. All right, then, so therefore the revenues were up 3.4% with excluding the surplus, as Chris said, and that is about in line with what our tax increase was for 2023. So that's one of the ways that the borough has been able to keep the tax increase limited. All right, then we'll get on to the expense side. The operating expenses last year were up 6%, which was slightly less than inflation year over year, or we're expecting that anyway. So just a few highlights from the operating expenses that really, I'll call them outliers, and those are the first one being employee benefit costs, which are comprised of health care, health insurance, and pension, which was up $406,000 year over year, we're expecting, or a 14% increase. Now that was largely as a result of the increase in state health insurance. There's probably some people here who are aware of the fact that the state of New Jersey originally for state workers proposed a 20% increase in health insurance across the board in 2023. And so many constituents, boroughs, et cetera, my husband works for Rutgers, for example, they fought that and were able to reduce it somewhat, but it's still ridiculous at a 14% increase. However, the borough really has very little control over that item. The second number that was kind of big is the fire department up $170,000, but I want to point out that's a 27% increase, but it's on a low denominator. So don't let the 27% freak you out. The fire department, and I'm sure Jen is very aware of this and discussed it with us, and I think you probably all know that the concept of a volunteer fire department across the country is getting more and more difficult to populate. So we in Stone Harbor and many other places have had to populate our firefighters with paid positions. So that's a part of the increase that you're seeing there. The good news is that all of the other operating costs that the borough has undertaken in 23 are only up 2.1%, which is pretty darn good. I mean, I wish I could do that well at home. So that's $228,000 year over year increase. So that's the second component of the budget. Then the third is capital reserve funding. Now, the capital reserve funding is mostly money that is put away, reserved each year for beach replenishment, our portion of it, which recently was about $2.3 million. And then bay dredging. Some of the capital projects that this borough undertakes can be funded by operating expenses, but that's not typical. Usually for capital type projects like beach replenishment, pumping stations, bay dredging, storm drains, streets, and all that stuff, you have to fund with debt. So I'll take a little credit here for SHPOA, and this is before I was a member, but SHPOA very much pushed the borough into establishing this capital reserve for at least beach replenishment and bay dredging. They've done that. And so this year the funding was $1.7 million for those purposes. And part of that was capital spending on other things. So we would like the borough to increase that reserve funding going forward and make the borough, the dredging, for example, and the beach replenishment more of a maintenance thing and less of a every 3 to 5 year event. And then finally, debt service, and you've all heard a lot about that. The debt service of $4.9 million a year is comprised of, we have roughly $34 million in debt, the borough does, and it's accumulated over many years, and we have a chart we'll show you in a second. But so each year you pay down a portion of the principal, just like you do with your mortgage, although this kind of debt is structured a little differently, and interest. So the principal pay down and the interest in 2023 will be $4.9 million. And that's up 19% versus last year. I don't think any new debt's been taken on, maybe for the fire truck, I'm not sure. But that's that. So those are the main components of the budget. And now we'll get on to our next area, which is that we talked about and Chris just covered, capital spending overview for 10 years. So last year we sent out to everyone and we presented what we felt working with the borough was what we could expect for the next 5 years in spending on sustainability, streets, et cetera, and this is where we were last year. So improvements and asset purchases of 11 million, a lot of that is the street repaving, things like that. Natural resources, the beach and bay, 19.5 million. That speaks for itself. Dredging, beach replenishment, et cetera, and then sustainability investments. And this is sort of like, I guess I'll say, it's the necessary reality that we're facing now. Sustainability investments comprise things like bay dredging, beach replenishment, stormwater management, pumping stations, all those things that are necessary to deal with rising sea levels at both the beach and the bay, and they're significant, and the whole country is facing that. So last year we had 47 million in forecasted over the next 5 years. Now this year it's at 29.4, but that is because we had 2 pump stations in the plan, one at 93rd, and I forgot where the second one was going to go, 80 somewhere, 83rd. Thank you. And we had 18 million estimated. And as I'm sure most of you read, the 93rd Street pump station was set to take place last year, and the cost rose from an initial estimate of like 9 million up to $20 million. And the borough said, whoa, wait a minute, we've got to go back to the drawing board on this. So that particular expense, while still necessary at some point in some way, has been tabled. And in the meantime, Manny has put in valves, an experimental valve system at 3 of the bulkheads at the low-lying level of Stone Harbor from 93 to 95th Street. That was just done this summer. Right now they'll be manually operated to try to control tidal inflow during high tides and things like that. If that's successful, I think the plan is to make that an automatic system. So that just started, so we'll see how we go through this fall. And then from there, we'll see what happens. But some expense is going to be, we're going to have some expense relative to moving water off the island. So the 47 million has dropped to 29 million, but that's not reality. Okay. All right, this is my last slide here. The truth is we've just gone over. Capital spending is going to rise significantly as we invest in these needed sustainability projects. Debt service, debt itself, which is at 34.2 million now, will certainly accelerate relative to these required capital investments. 20-year AA rated muni bonds have now risen, along with all other interest rates, from 1.5% to 4% in the last 2 years. So there's going to be a higher cost for all of us, but I also want you to know that in speaking to Manny, the borough is not sitting on their hands here. We have access to iBank funding, which is significantly less than the 4% AA rated muni debt, and I'm sure that will be undertaken. So, but point still is that the debt level itself is certain to increase over the next 5 to 10 years. Okay, and this is my last slide. All right, so the debt, here's a chart, a bar chart of the debt over the last 10 years. The blue line is how much debt is authorized. So in order to raise that, you can't just go out and do it. There's a regulatory process that you have to go through and get permission from voters, et cetera, to authorize debt that you might draw on going forward. So that's the blue line. You can see in 2013 there was something like $25 million in debt authorized, and now at the end of 22 we're up to like 50 million in debt authorized. But the red line is what we've actually used. So again, from 13, roughly, I'm going to guess 23 million up to 22, as I mentioned, 34 million. So my guess is we'll have to go out and get more debt authorized at some point, and then you'll certainly see both of those lines increasing. And so SHPOA, our mandate is, and we've been doing it, we're working with the borough, and we really would like the borough to adopt a 10-year capital plan. We realize that budgeting is not that easy 3 to 5 years out, but capital spending is something that you can forecast and you shouldn't be surprised by. So that is our number one thing on sustainability and borough engagement. And that's it, back.
And now for some good news. I think that we owe many members of the current council our gratitude, because the Finance Committee, Council President, they recognize a lot of these problems and are working hard to change the trajectory. But as I said before, it's like turning a battleship. Municipal finance is slow to change. And so they're working very hard. They recognize the issues. And I think I'm hopeful, actually, that we've seen a change in the council to address these issues. And we'll hear from some of our folks today. And they do, I think they've earned our respect and thanks for the work they're doing. The council has asked the business administrator and CFO to develop a 10-year capital plan, and we'll continue to work with them and share the work that SHPOA has done in identifying the needs and put together what we think is a good plan. One of the projects that Borough Engagement has done, we spent the last several months looking at alternative revenue sources, including potentially a short-term rental and hotel tax that can bring a needed substantial revenue stream to the borough, which will relieve some of the pressure that we are forecasting will come to bear on property taxes. We'll have more to say about that in the coming months. Some of the other projects that are on our plate that we'd like to take a look at. The Stone Harbor Library operates at a significant cost to taxpayers. We're looking, are there alternative ways to finance the library, to restructure it in a way that the cost to taxpayers is less? The state permits the establishment of stormwater utilities, and many communities in New Jersey are taking steps to implement this. We want to take a look to see if it makes sense for Stone Harbor. Again, it's a way to take the costs dealing with some of the stormwater issues, isolate them into an entity that can potentially be funded through those costs and take some of the borrowing pressure off the general obligation side of the borough's balance sheet. Some of the shore communities also have beach utilities that capture the beach revenue and take it off of the borough's, again, the borough's general budget. It's another thing we'd like to take a look at. And Stone Harbor owns and operates its own water and sewer utilities, and it might make sense to sell those to a private operator who can then bear the burden of future improvements and debt service. So these are some of the things that we're looking at. Just want to say that SHPOA represents your interests in these matters, and we welcome your input. Anything that you think we should be taking a look at, or comments you have on things that we have already done, we welcome your comments, and you can reach any of the trustees by email, or you can go to our website and enter your questions, comments, or suggestions into the comment box. We want to be good and valued partners with the borough as it works through these complex issues that confront Stone Harbor. And a lot of them are beyond our control. The council has to deal with state mandates and DEP regulations and all sorts of things that sometimes make sense but frequently make no sense at all. But be that as it may, they've got to deal with those, and we'd like to assist in any way we can and be a good partner in these endeavors. But we also think we should be frank and honest in our work and speak out when we see things that we think should be done differently. So we want to be advocates, but we also want to be, we want to be partners and advocates, but we also want to be careful in making sure that the borough understands what we think and what property owners think. So that's our presentation. Rich will come up and introduce our panel. And anything that we've said that you are interested in asking more questions, we've got some great people here who can answer those for you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Susan. I mentioned earlier the qualities of the trustees and some of their background and what they bring. And I'll just make a couple of comments. Chris, for example, was the mayor of his town in northern New Jersey for a number of years and now sits on the town council. So he's neck deep in all the town he lives in is somewhat similar to Stone Harbor in terms of its size and the types of homes, the types of homeowners. He's neck deep in all these issues. So it's amazing when you talk to him about these things. He's saying, well, in this town they do this and that. And you're going, like, this is wild. Tony Tenari, I believe you're also involved in your municipality, and several of the other trustees are as well. So these are folks that are bringing their experience in serving their communities in Pennsylvania and New Jersey to bear to try to help us think through what can we do to help Stone Harbor be a better borough, be the best place it can be the seashore at its best. So again, that's when I talk about the quality of the folks that have volunteered their time and talent to put forth. This is an example of it. So again, folks, thank you for everything you do. Before we get to the Q&A, we have a couple of, most of our council members are here. I see Bunny sitting here in the front. Bunny's always here, Bunny Parzich, councilwoman. I saw Robin Casper, I think somewhere when she came in earlier. I don't know if Robin's here, but Robin always attends the sessions. Council President Frank Dallahan, he's here in the front row. He's always up there. See somebody's hand back there. That was Robin. Okay, thank you. Robin's all the way in the back. So she got the best seat in the house. And then, of course, we have Councilwoman Gensemer and Councilman Moore who are with us as part of the Q&A panel. Couple of points, and folks, while we do this, if you can get us set up, that would be great. The mayor was asked to participate in this morning's session. Unfortunately, she had a personal commitment, a long-standing personal commitment, so was unable to join us this morning. She sends her regrets. Also, we invited Jim Kraft, the CFO, and we work very closely with Jim. I have a lot of respect for Jim and the work he does. Jim's on holiday, a well-deserved holiday, so Jim was unable to join us this morning. So for the Q&A panel, because the topic, the theme, was financial sustainability, if we couldn't have the CFO, we said probably the next best person is Councilwoman Gensemer, who's the chair of the Administration and Finance Committee. So if anybody knows the ins and outs of the budget, it's the Administration and Finance Committee. At the same time, Manny Parada, our borough administrator, volunteered, and he was going to be part of it, but volunteered his time as well. So he's joined us today, again, to be able to answer your questions. For those of you that participated in the Q&A session with the borough administrator, it was really well received. Manny took about an hour and a half or so of questions. Any question was fair game. He answered them all honestly. Where we didn't have answers, we went back and got the information and provided that to the questioner. So we're really pleased that Manny was able to join us. And then Councilman Reese Moore. Reese is our liaison. You know that. Reese has been working closely with us for a number of years. He knows how we work, what we do, what we're focused on as well as anybody. So we asked Councilman Moore, as we always have, as our liaison, to join us for the Q&A session. So that's what's going on. Folks, if you want to move up to the stage, and while you do that, I'm going to set up the ground rules. So we're going to set a microphone. We're going to have one of our trustees, Dawn, stand back here with a microphone. If you have a question, please come down to this area here and ask your question. In the interest of time, we ask everybody to ask one question, please, because there may be others that want to get their questions. If we have enough time in the end and you want to ask a second question, come on back down. But I want to be respectful of everybody having an opportunity to ask a question. The questions, please keep them towards topics about the borough. So I don't want, if you come up and say, well, I got a fire hydrant in front of my house, what can we do about that? We're not going to deal with that here. What we're going to ask you to do is if you have a specific question about a specific issue related to your property or something else, send us the question in our contact box. We get those all the time, and we answer all of them. I usually will work with Councilman Moore, who he will find the right person to answer the question, whether it be the construction office, the borough administrator, the police chief, etc. So the questions we'd like to have really be I would say, of interest to everybody here in the audience. And the final thing I'll ask, and I just say, please be respectful. Nothing personal. Don't shout out from the audience, if you would please, if you come up. We'll take as much time as we have. We have right now probably about 50 minutes for the questions. Turn the lights off. Not that you can't see them, but so that blind doesn't blind you there. So just be respectful. You know, these folks have offered their time. They have agreed. Any question regarding the borough is fair game. And yeah, hopefully we'll have a really good discussion. So with that, we're going to kick it off. The first thing I'm going to do, and I'll turn the mic to these folks, but any statements, any comments any of you would like to make before we get into the Q&A? Councilwoman Gensemer.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. It's a privilege to serve on Borough Council, and it's rewarding to be here and to learn from all of you. I really appreciate you all being here on a sunny Saturday when you could be enjoying a beach just a block and a half away. And I appreciate the dedication that you're showing to Stone Harbor to give up your time to be here. I want you to know that I'm available at any time. My email address is on, as well as Manny's and Reese's, is on the Borough website, and I invite you to reach out anytime with your concerns.
I would just say that we don't take it for granted that we work for all of you. And, you know, we work, spend a lot of time, energy, working with the different employees at the borough, as well as interfacing with the community, as well as the members of SHPOA. So I think this forum, as far as an opportunity to ask unsolicited questions, although I would say it's a bit scary, a little bit intimidating, but at the same time, I think we welcome the opportunity to be able to have a frank conversation and discussion with you all.
Okay, first question, anybody? Come on, somebody's got to have a question. Please, sir, if you would, just come up. And if you would, please, ladies and gentlemen, your name and your Stone Harbor address, if you'd be so kind, just so we know, the folks would like to know who they're talking to.
Okay. Oh, there it is. Hello, everybody. I'm Steve Safara. My address is 10023 Sunrise Drive. My question has to do with, and I'm not sure this is unique to Bayfront homeowners, but we recently received a letter about a survey about at-risk flood properties. The letter referenced access to the properties. We're interested in understanding a little bit more about what is happening there and this access to the properties part of it.
Thank you. So in working with our CRS system, FEMA is requesting that we extend out what they call a repetitive loss analysis. It's a very sensitive topic only because anybody who is a part of the FEMA flood insurance program, if you've received more than one loss or have put in more than one claim, I should say, your information is subject to the privacy laws of the federal government. So we are not allowed to get that information. And yet we're being charged with trying to find out all the repetitive loss properties in the borough. So it's a very difficult and very fine line that we have to cross. What the survey that the letter sends you to, that Survey Monkey, is that we're trying to get, without getting into very specific property identification or anything that can, relate Mr. Jones or, Ms. Smith's property. And we're just trying to identify those areas that have suffered those types of repetitive losses without getting into the privacy issues. So consultant that we're working with on the CRS program developed this survey. It's been used in other communities throughout the country, actually, successfully. So it's not anonymous. We're not using that data anything other than it's a mapping skill that is part of our CRS point system.
And just for anyone that doesn't know, the CRS is the community rating system. So that really determines the percentage discount for the flood insurance. So that's a big initiative for the borough this year, is to reduce the flood insurance premiums. I think as most people recognize, the end of last year it was changed as a result of some points being moved from the Sandy, and as a result the borough rating was reduced from a 5 to a 7, and we've been working tirelessly since then to restore a rating of 5, which we're confident that we'll be able to achieve by the end of this year.
And being overachievers, we have a goal of going to a 4. This was one of our most unpleasant surprises that we had. We're a new A&F committee. I took over as chair this year, and I have a new committee with Council President Frank Dallahan and Reese Moore. We've accomplished a lot, but our A&F reports always start with our CRS update, because this is of utmost importance. While we fell from a 5 to a 7, both Sea Isle and Avalon have made the CRS program of primary importance in their boroughs, and they have a friendly competition between the two of them trying to get to a 3. When I was at a regional meeting, there was an audible gasp in the room when it was announced that Stone Harbor fell from a 5 to a 7. We realize that our eyes have been off the ball, and it is a goal and a primary goal of the A&F committee to make. We've developed a task force that is working on it. It's an interdisciplinary task force. Manny's on that task force and leading it, along with Ray Poudrier, who lives, eats, and breathes CRS. And we are absolutely dedicated to getting you the insurance discount that you deserve.
Folks, understand, this benefits you, because we get the CRS score down, your flood insurance rates go down. For those of you that had to renew your flood insurance this year, you know how pleasant that was in terms of cost increases. So this is an example of something that's going to benefit all of us by getting this right. Sir, you would please?
Yes, thank you very much. My name is Dick East, and our property is at 10,010 Sunset Drive. I spent a little more than 50 years in the public and private finance business. And when I see a $4.9 million debt service on a $34 million debt, it just causes me to say, what are the rates and terms of those debts? So if you could be so kind to provide those to our association in some separate communication, that would be really helpful.
We have that information.
I'm sure you do.
And we can provide it. You want to comment?
Absolutely. We will get you that information and provide it to you. What I'd like to say to you is that our capital plan is of utmost importance to this A&F committee, and it has been. I should say that we started in March, and we sat down, and all of a sudden we looked at each other and realized that there was not a transparency before, and our goal is transparency. You're going to see a lot more of the discussions that we have out in, they're going to be public, and not everyone agrees with this, but we are not so inclined to go into closed sessions, but rather have these discussions in front of our taxpayers. So you'll be seeing a lot more of that. We are doing some other things, such as we're restructuring the government through attrition. We're looking at our operating costs. We're working together to address these issues. It's been said that there's tension in the council. I would like to say that we have repeated 5-1 votes that show that we're working together. We are neighbors and we're colleagues, but we disagree all the time. But I believe that we have a council now that is working together to solve these issues, and the debt is of utmost importance to us. We have tasked the CFO to create a 10-year plan, and we expect to be presenting that here in 2023 in the coming months.
So maybe a quick answer, Dick, to your point I want to make. So the majority of the debt that's outstanding right now, there's a debt issuance from 2018. Right now it's in the mid-20 millions. I know this only because as an economy nerd, I study this stuff. Even though I'm retired, I still enjoy this. 2018, it's got interest rates between 4 and 5%. And then there's another large chunk that's a bond anticipation, so-called BAN. That was issued last year. Those it's running at about 1.5% now. Now, BAN is a short-term financing vehicle that ultimately gets refinanced into a longer-term vehicle. But I think the point I want to make is, so Susan highlighted earlier on the slide that 20-year AA rated muni bonds have gone from 1.5% in 2021 to 4% now, depending on where things go, may climb higher. So again, in 2018, when we issued general obligation bond, we got 4 to 5%. The question is, okay, when we have to go out now in the future, finance or borrow money for these sustainability projects, with the interest rates having moved, what's going to happen? We don't know yet, but one has to anticipate that, like everybody, we're going to be paying higher interest rates on our debt, even with the quality of the debt, the quality of our rating, simply because of the movement of market interest rates, which is going to then put even more challenge in terms of debt service.
Yeah, and just adding on to what you're saying, that's one of the reasons to create a stormwater utility, is that we can access the iBank and borrow at lower rates, and we are working on that.
Jen, Reese, could you possibly explain, because some of the people may not be familiar with the notion of the utility, stormwater, beach, et cetera. What is it, and what are the benefits of setting up a stormwater utility or a beach utility or whatever? It might help people understand the issue.
Well, I know Manny has been involved extensively with setting up a number of different storm water utilities, so it has experience with that. So I'd like him to best answer that question.
Thank you. For those who don't know my background, I'm an environmental engineer, so this is right up my long-term career. So a stormwater utility differs from a tax structure in that you control the amount that you would put into the utility. If you want to have a lower electric bill, you shut off your air conditioner. If you want to have a lower water bill, you use less water. A stormwater utility works in the same way. It incentivizes you to reduce the amount of runoff that comes off your property onto the city street, borough streets in here, and then that we as a borough have to deal with that amount of stormwater. So in that sense, the system will be set up where you will have that control as a property owner. If you want to put in green roofs that will absorb a lot more of the water, there's a possibility. High infiltration sands, rain barrels, there's a whole host of things, high absorbing water trees that absorb high water. This will all be listed out in a utility program, and you will get credits for whatever you do in terms of reducing the amount of runoff that comes off your property. The financial side of this is that this is not general obligation money that is being used for this. It is truly a utility. In that sense, you can have debt separate from the rest of the general obligation debt, so that if you build a pump station, a $20 million pump station that is used only for stormwater, that debt should be carried by the utility and not by the general obligation. That's the basic framework of a stormwater utility. I've worked extensively in Wilmington, Delaware, with the stormwater utility there. It's really held as one of the shining examples in the state. Worked closely with Philadelphia when Philadelphia was setting theirs up. A couple of other communities throughout the country. We don't have any in New Jersey yet. The law was passed pre-COVID. Several communities are close, certainly ahead of us in terms of getting it. The state definitely is pushing communities to go that way. They would love to see, and they've made a statement that they'd love to see 600 stormwater utilities throughout the state. There's about, I think, 3,500 nationwide right now. It's really big on the West Coast, it's big on the East Coast, it's getting bigger on the East Coast, I should say. And then there's a couple of areas in the middle of the country where it also has developed and grown. So it's not a new idea. This thing's been around for probably 35 years. It started in Oregon. It was the first utility of its kind in the nation, and it definitely has spread west to east.
Thank you.
Next question, anybody?
Yeah.
Jump back here.
We're Don. I can yell loud enough.
That's all right, we'll get to the mic.
Okay, you're talking about the stormwater.
Excuse me, can you give us your name?
I'm sorry. I'm Joby Harkins, 263 94th Street. You're talking about the stormwater utility and incentivizing property owners to reduce the runoff. That sounds like a code word for your tax. Is that what we're talking about?
No, so it's not a tax at all. And that was one of the orchestrated moves that they had in Eugene, Oregon when it first was introduced, is that they tried to label it a rain tax. It's not a tax at all. It truly is a user-based fee. So the amount of water that you produce on your property that reaches the street will be the amount of water that you're actually paying for. If you can reduce that, and you can reduce it in a lot of ways. Depends a lot on your own individual properties, obviously. But there are many ways to reduce the amount of runoff that comes off your property. One is reduce the amount of impervious surface. If it's impervious, water can't penetrate through to the groundwater. It's going to run off and onto the property. Two, you can use certain plants that absorb a lot of water. There are high infiltration sands. We do this a lot along First Avenue. The Borough is doing this right now at the dune line and as well along First Avenue, where we have infiltration ditches where the stormwater that used to go out into the ocean is actually being captured and trapped and sent into the groundwater along First Avenue. Now, we take advantage because it's the highest point on the island, obviously. It's going to be up to each individual homeowner. I should say property owner. It's not just homes, because the businesses will also be part of this. And how you design, whatever features you want to do. So we don't have the entire structure laid out, but it's probably going to end up with a base fee that can then be reduced based on the amount of improvements you make to reduce the water coming off your property. So it's not a tax, it really is a user-based fee.
Maybe if I may offer a suggestion, the way to think about it is if you look at the work of Councilman Parzich and the Utilities Committee this year, where the utility fees were restructured so that you pay a base amount, but then as you use more water and more sewage, the price increases. So basically, if you use a lot of water, you pay more. If you don't use a lot of water, you don't pay as much. So it really is trying to incentivize folks to manage their water use and manage then therefore the sewage. Same concept. Basically, it's a user-based fee. So if you take action to reduce the amount of storm water, et cetera, you don't pay as much. And anybody that just wants to let the water run off, they pay for it. Because the alternative is you make the investment through the general budget, borrow the money, and then everybody pays. Whether you put no stormwater out there or whether you just let it run off the So the idea is really to start moving more toward the idea of those that consume the service, pay for the service, and if you want to pay less, then you work on ways to try to conserve water, try to have less stormwater, et cetera. So it's really, it's a much fairer system than it is just to say, okay, we're gonna have to, because we have to make the investment, we don't have a choice. Unless you want to let us continue to flood. But then what you're doing is you're really pushing the cost of it to those that contribute the most towards the water line. Other questions? Okay, Dawn, you're gonna get more steps.
Oh, boy. I'm gonna go this side.
Thank you. So please, if you wouldn't mind, just your name, address.
John Reddy, 216
Let's get the mic down. I can yell a lot because Scott doesn't need to hear me, but he wants to hear you.
John Reddy, 216 105th. On this water runoff, aren't we part of the problem as a borough, though? I mean, we zone, we allow all these houses to have, there's no permeable ground on half of these houses. The water runoff is created after all this new building going on that we count pavers and swimming pools and driveways. We count everything as permeable. I mean, there's very little grass, very little area for anything to get absorbed. So through zoning, we're creating this runoff problem, and now we're expecting the homeowners to make the correction.
But John, isn't it the homeowners that build that ask for this? The zoning allows it, but it's the homeowners that build the homes that have a pool that produce the great one.
But through zoning isn't part of the solution.
So John, to your question, if you go back to what Manny and Rich previously said, if you have a utility and you're looking at each individual home, then regardless of how this big home got there and what they did, they would be paying, under the situation that Manny talked about, a lot more money. Think of it, as Rich said, if we had one water meter for town, and we just divided it by the number of properties, and we didn't allocate it on use. That's what's happening with a lot of the stormwater. If you and your neighbor have the same square footage property, you're paying the same nominal runoff fees. But to your point, if some people are improving that in a different way, that they're causing more runoff, they're going to pay more under the scenario that Manny talked about. That's this more equitable share. But I agree with you. I look at places, I redid my place, and I knew you have to have whatever it was, 35%. And I look at some of these and I go, I don't know how the math works out. So I agree with that one.
This is certainly a challenge for the borough, and our zoning code is probably the most hotly debated issue, especially right now. And we are continually looking at our zoning code, and we welcome your suggestions on how you would like to see it amended.
Other questions? One second. Let's see if I can kill myself. Actually, fortunately, we have a long enough cable that I can hand this to Councilman Parada.
What I want to say is I believe everything in Stone Harbor is connected to the zoning codes, certainly. But I do want to say that several years ago, there was a lot grading ordinance that was passed that does have, or I understand there are parts of it that there are requirements on these new homes that have collection systems that are supposed to be built in. Now, one of your trustees, Justine Herzog, I don't know if Justine is here. She's a wonderful engineer. She understands a lot of this. I wish she were here to take over because she would right now. I'm not sure how well that element that is supposed to be in the lot grading ordinance is working. But that's what we are looking very hard at, this lot grading ordinance right now, to see if what was intended is actually working. And these new, and so over the next several months, maybe over the next year, we will get to it. But the new homes do have the responsibility to collect a lot of water. And if we didn't have so much roof space that is taking up a lot of the lot, my proposition to push the setbacks in, and I don't want to go over that. You can watch the video of the last council meeting to check that out. But it may, in the end, stop some of the use of roofs over patios and porches. And the more we reduce the roof sizes, perhaps that water that leaves the roofs can go into the ground. Anyway, it is a work in progress, and you can. Our think tank is supposed to be the planning board. So the planning board meeting is next Monday. Zoom in and participate.
Thank you, Bunny. Okay, there's a question up here. 1 second, let me get the mic back.
Tim Carney, 300 block of 96th Street. And I wanted to thank Rich and SHPOA for putting this on. It's very valuable. Yeah, I have to go back to the budget because I heard that from over the last 6 months as you knock on doors. And I want to ask council, can we do more with less? Can we drop our operating expenses? I look at 3.4% tax increases every year. Our operating expenses are going up 6%. 1/3 of our operating expenses is debt service, and that's going up almost 30%. So we've got this credit card and we keep spending. And yet when I look at what we're delivering to the taxpayers is a lower flood rating, which means higher insurance premiums for each individual person. So if we're spending money, what are we spending it on? We've got to pay for our own trash cans. And I would like to hear from council, what are we going to do to drop our operating expenses and balance the budget? Because if 1/3 of what we spend money on is the debt, then I think we could do, I think we can do better, but I'd like to hear what council has to say about that.
Tim, thank you for your excellent question. And, this is the challenge of being on council. So I came on council 3 years ago, and I have to live with what happened before me, and all we can do is change the trajectory moving forward. That being said, this council, this A&F committee this year, we have reduced our administrative costs by $250,000. That is significant. We've only been together for over 6 months. We have talked extensively about restructuring government to make it more efficient, and quite frankly, to have lower costs for our taxpayers. In March, when the lights got turned on and we sat with the CFO, we learned the harsh reality that our budget was over its cap. And we looked at each other and we said, what are we going to do? And we realized we were dealing with layoffs. And we were going to have to restructure government. And through attrition, some employees moved on. That prevented us having to do layoffs for this year. That being said, we're not comfortable where we're at with our operating expenses. This borough made a commitment to have a volunteer fire department. That significantly impacted our operating expenses. I'm sorry, it's a full-time paid fire department. And one of our A&F committee's biggest challenges is we have this volunteer fire company that now is paid. We have the paid employees. We have 9 of them, and then we have some seasonal that come in and help. Yet we go and answer fires all over Cape May County, and you as the taxpayer are funding this fire company that responds all over the county. So we talk about shared services to reduce costs. Our task is trying to spread our cost for our paid fire company to other communities. That's one way we can look at reducing our operating expenses. If you take out the volunteer fire company, our operating expenses have really only gone up about 2%, which is really pretty good. As far as employee health care costs, we've already met on that for next year, and we have a plan for next year because the employee health care costs are one of our bigger challenges in our operating budget. We continually are looking at, and I would say every meeting we discuss, ways that we can outsource and ways that we can participate in shared services to reduce our operating expenses. That being said, you bring up trash cans. We have heard loud and clear from our constituents that they want rear yard trash pickup. And we are committed to providing rear yard trash pickup because we're told in stereo, loudly, we want rear yard trash pickup. We started out when we first looked at our issues with our trash service. We have looked at subcontracting the services, but it would be a totally different world as far as trash pickup. Absolutely.
Let me address the trash situation just from a public works perspective. First off is the method with which we collect the trash results in about $300 additional cost to each homeowner. So with that perspective, I'd like to just take the advantage of having you all here and just a show of hands. Is that something that you would wish to us to continue? And we can continue to survey it, but recognizing that it costs each one of you about $300 more per year to have rear yard pickup versus the service that is that is done in different communities. How many people would want to continue the rear yard trash pickup? I'd say it's pretty universal. The other thing, just to clear up a couple of, I think, misconceptions with the trash can, and then I'd like to fall back on some capital expenditures questions. First off is when we looked at our trash collection process, one of the first things that we wanted to do, and this is was to be able to make it a safer process for our borough employees. So that was the first thing that we looked at is how do we make this trash process safer for our borough employees. That led to some discussions with some experts as far as how other communities are doing their trash collection, and that's when we made the decision to make the investment in what's called trash tippers. And those tippers are those yellow pieces of equipment that are on the back of the trucks, where you hook the trash can into that tipper and no longer need for the people that are collecting the trash to pick it up and throw it over into the truck. So it will and has reduced our workers' comp claims because they don't have as much physical labor to be able to empty the canisters. So that's number one. Then that led to a need to be able to look at what other changes do we need to make in the actual trash canisters themselves. And I'll say initially, when we looked at this, we thought that we were going to go down the route of having consistent sized trash canisters for everyone. But then the more we looked into it, the more we surveyed the homeowners, we found that about half of homeowners already had trash canisters that were similar to what we wanted to have as the standard. So then that led us to the third decision point, which was rather than standardize one size, give homeowners the flexibility to be able to pick the size that works best for them, recognizing that about half of the homeowners already have these trash canisters. So all of that led to the decision to have more flexibility in the trash canisters, but at the same time have a safer and better trash collection process for the borough employees.
Another consideration that we looked at was if everyone has to have the same size trash cans, you would all, not all, but most of you would have to modify the trash corrals that you have at your homes. And we considered that as well. What I'd like Manny to speak on is our staffing issues.
Thank you. So one of the things obviously that makes us kind of the unique town that we are is this rear yard pickup. I've been on crews myself doing it. It's very difficult work. It's very labor intensive. It's in the summertime. It's quite the workout. So if anybody wants to burn about 7,000 calories, please show up on a Saturday morning. Seriously, all kidding aside, it's very difficult work. We have some serious challenges with our staffing issues. There's been a labor shortage across Cape May County, as you may or may not know, is particularly on the what we'll call the blue collar end. We are offering our seasonal staff. We hire about 22 seasonal staff to assist with the twice-a-week pickup when we go to twice-a-week pickup in the summer. They are generally coming in at $20 an hour. Maurice Pier is paying about $20 an hour. So we're competing with the same group of people that Maurice Pier can attract to sit on a boardwalk and spin a dial versus walking miles and miles in the heat and pulling out cans and tipping them and bringing them back. The labor shortage issue is a major concern. It extends somewhat into our permanent staff, our year-round staff as well, but it really is emphasized tremendously in the seasonal help. It's not to say that it's impossible. Obviously, we haven't failed yet. We are still getting out there, but it is quite the challenge long term. We're trying to keep our costs down as low as we can, but the reality is that dollar point is not attracting enough people to get this work done.
Other questions? We have time for one or two more. Let me go to this gentleman sitting in the middle here, and then we'll come right over here.
Doug Weir, 370 95th Street. I think this question is primarily for Manny. The test valves that you recently installed for flood mitigation at the end of 95th, 93rd, et cetera. I realize they haven't been there very long, but what have you learned so far from that? And is there a finite date that this test is to end, or is that flexible?
Sure. Thank you for your question. So one of the valves is not in yet. The knife gate valve that we are installing on 94th Street is on order. It's due here in November. So what we've done with that specific valve is we put what we call a dummy valve. It's a different type of valve, regular street valve that's in place right now. We're still operating it, but it's not the ultimate valve that we really want to get tested. So in essence, we haven't really truly started our pilot study, although we've already learned a few things. At the end of August, we had a king tide events or spring tide events that came because of the full moon that we had on August 30th, as well as the moon was in apogee, meaning, or perigee, I'm sorry, it was in perigee, meaning that it was at its closest point to the Earth. For those who don't know, the moon actually goes in an oval. It doesn't go in a circle around the Earth. It actually creates an oval around the Earth. So anyway, to get a little technical, but the moon being in full moon and close to the Earth creates a spring effect across the entire ocean that springs the water forward and then pushes the water back. So our low tides are usually lower than normal, and our high tides are usually higher than normal. And that occurs for about 8 or 9 high tide cycles, so 4 or 5 days. During that time, we had the valves closed, and we also got rain during 2 of those rain events. So it was, in essence, the true idea of the pilot study was to get a high tide event with rainfall. It didn't match up perfectly because a lot of the rain occurred during low tide, so we were able to open the valves, drain out the rainwater, and then come back and close them before the high tide came back in. So we learned 94th and 95th Street stayed dry pretty much the entire time. 93rd Street did receive some flooding, and that unfortunately was because of the bulkhead that was being replaced just south of 93rd Street. The contractor had left a gap in the bulkhead. He was under construction, it wasn't intentional. You know, it was just they were pulling out the old sheets, and then the high tides came in and water poured in at an elevation of about 3.5 feet. So that water comes pouring in through the hole in the bulkhead and flooded out 93rd Street. So that wasn't a true representation. It's a combination of things, right? So you need to have the higher bulkheads with the valves in place. The elevated road that we did on 94th Street seemed to work perfectly. For those who don't know, part of this is we actually raised the road on 94th Street, and it worked out particularly well. I'm sorry, 93rd Street. Did I say 94th? So 93rd Street, the raising of the road worked well. Unfortunately, we had that gap in the bulkhead that allowed the water to come over the surface instead of coming from underneath. So that's kind of a long explanation to say so far so good. We're finding out that the manual valves are working well. It will be labor intensive for the short period. Luckily, we have a system in place that it takes about 5 or 6 minutes to close and open those valves. And we're trying to improve on that. Ultimately, if this is the idea, we're going to have this automated. So the decision-making process that I go through every time trying to figure out, do we open or close the valves? I look at, obviously the tides, the wind speed, the wind direction. If it's a northeasterly wind, we have a very different attitude towards it. If it's westerly or southwesterly. As well as the rain events and timing of the rain. So I've got the logic program kind of worked out, depending on what we ultimately do here. But if we end up with an electronic system that will automatically do this, it will work off of bay levels as well as those other factors, wind speed, wind direction, and the tides.
And I'd just like to add one more thing to the pilot study, Doug, and that is one of the reasons why we're undergoing the pilot study is to better determine what do we need as far as a pump station. The initial thought was that we needed up to 3 different pump stations, and that this is allowing us to be able to better quantify, what our actual needs are. And again, one of the decisions that was made early on was to stop the pump station that cost had escalated from $3 million up to approximately $20 million. So that's really this. At that point, we stopped the pump station project as it was for 93rd Street, and then we decided to use the valves as a pilot station. And it just happened to be fortuitous timing because that's when Manny came on board with all of his experience and expertise with the water and sewer projects that he's been involved in for many, many years.
Okay, folks, last question. I promised this gentleman here, for those of you that have a question and don't have the opportunity, please send it to our contact box. Go to the website, contact@SHPOA.org. Send it to us. I promise we will respond to you. I'll ask our panelists to help, and we will provide you a response to your question. I did promise you 10:40. I'm going to stick to that. We can probably sit here all afternoon because I know there's a lot of things you can find. So please, if you do have a question, something you'd like to know, send it to us. We'll get back.
Rich, can I say, we'll also be here after the meeting if you'd like to approach us.
Want to, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
No, you can ask. Go ahead, sir, please. No, please. Please, by all means, we have time. We held that time just for you.
I live in D.C., so we're about 10
Name and
Carolyn Surface, 119th and 2nd.
Thank you.
We're about 10 years into a stormwater program, and DC Water's done an amazing job. We have some rivers, we had amazing stormwater issues. So, you kind of think about it here in your property, you're getting free water every time it rains, every time it storms. So you want that water to stay on your property. So if you look up above your property, you can put in a green roof and take care of the footprint of your house. You can put in rain barrels and keep that free water on your property to water your grass or plants. You can put in plants that are native to the area and don't need as much water. And we've had in a yard like that for, I guess, about 5 or 6 years. It's phenomenal how much you save on the water that's metered that comes in because you're using the free water as part of the storm system. And then, gosh, every month I get money back on my water bill because we get credits for all the stuff that we've done, which is really not heavy lifting at all. So you guys have the green gardens down around the tower. DC has put in a lot of tree lawns in public areas that are rain gardens now, and almost a no-brainer.
Carolyn?
Thank you.
Look forward to putting yourself forward next year to be a SHPOA trustee. Because you've got a lot of great ideas right there. Thank you. It's the best place in the world. So.
I just wanted to say thank you. Prior to me coming here, actually a few years ago now, I was a vice president of Metcalf & Eddy, an engineering firm that's now AECOM. But Metcalf & Eddy was the primary force behind DC Water's decision to go down that pathway. So, going full circle here, 20 years ago, we came up with these concepts at DC, and it's making my skin tingle, so thank you.
So, ladies and gentlemen, I have 10:39, so I'm going to hold myself to that. First, I want to thank all of you. I want to thank you for participating. I want to thank you for your questions. I know there's probably a lot more out there. Please do send them. Or if you wish, as Jen mentioned, they'll be outside in the lobby for a bit. Bunny, thank you for your input as always in regards to zoning, which I know is your passion. I have one ask of all of you before I let these folks all go, and that is, I need your help. We're still trying to solicit members. We have probably about 1/3, maybe about 40% of the homes in Stone Harbor that are members of SHPOA. We'd like to keep growing that. The more members we have, The more input we get, the more influence we have, and frankly, the more dues we can collect to have bigger and bigger projects of the year. We've got some really interesting ones being planned. So I know you're all members, you're on board. If you have friends, if you have neighbors that aren't, please get them to sign up. I would really appreciate it. If they sign up now, it'll carry them all the way through the end of 24. So they get kind of a few months for free. They'll get all the stuff that we send out. We have something very special planned coming up for October. Stay tuned. We're not ready to talk about it yet, but I think it's something you'll really find, if you find this good, I think it's something you'll find equally enjoyable. And finally, before you leave, please join me in thanking Manny, Jen, and Reese for their time. And for their willingness to take on your questions. I will agree with Reese. I was nervous at the start of this, but you were great. Thanks all. Safe travels wherever you're headed for. We'll see you next summer.